I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the...
Oh my gosh, we're back. We're back with another episode of a discussion on government efficiency. Tonight we're going to be talking about Oregon's public schools, our K through 12 system. We've got Alex Lopez with us on the slide deck.
Glad to be back.
Keeping us
In check.
on track tonight.
Yes, sir.
Christine Drazan, House
Hello.
Republican leader, back again. Good to have you back.
Thanks for the opportunity. One of my favorite topics. I'm totally looking forward to this, so thank you.
I love it. An inaugural visit to the Oregon D.O.G.E discussion on government efficiency, Boomer Wright.
The one, the only.
Glad to be here.
State representative serving the Central Oregon coast.
From Coos Bay up to Florence and inland to some great small communities.
Former teacher.
Former teacher, former principal, middle school, elementary school, superintendent of schools in mighty Mapleton, Oregon.
So you're saying you got a little bit of street cred in this topic.
I've been around the block, yes.
And why do they call you Boomer?
Well, in about 1972, I moved to Florence to teach third grade. And after about 3 months, the principal walks down to my room after school and says, "Dwayne, you're doing a hell of a job. We really appreciate you."
Did he just say his name was actually Dwayne?
He did.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. And I've known you a long time.
He said you're doing it. You're doing a great job.
And he says, and in fact, we think we should give you a raise. And I thought, well, wonderful. He said, yeah, that's good news. The bad news is we're firing the rest of the teachers in the building. I really? He goes, yeah, we just feel like if you open all the classroom doors, you can teach the whole school from your room.
Oh.
And so next morning, the memo went around and said, the Boomer in room 32, and I've been Boomer ever since.
The Boomer. The Boomer.
The
32.
Boomer.
I love it. I love it. Well, welcome to this important topic. Alex, let's dive right into it.
Yes, sir. Okay. Well, back by popular demand, your favorite game, Senator. Where does Oregon rank? So,
Spoiler alert, Boomer.
Rank is the appropriate word here.
I'm not very good at this. That's why he's picking on me.
I always have to.
Okay.
But so our first question here is where does Oregon rank in overall K-12 education quality? And so just take a minute and kind of think about it. Don't shout it out.
Out of the 50 states.
Out of the 50
Yeah.
states, 50 being the worst, and
Old Jeopardy music.
number one
I'm not
being
sure
the
we're
best.
allowed to do that.
Oh, fair.
legally.
It was a quiet hum. Did it count? Until you said so.
I don't think they're going to sue us. I think
All
we're
right,
okay.
all right. Maybe it was off key.
I've got my rank.
feel like I
in
wanna
terms
hold
of
up-
quality. Yeah, that's.
We should get cards. Just
I wanna-
We've
So
talked about it.
Yeah.
we've talked about it.
Do you have your number? You got it locked in?
Oh, yes.
I've got my number.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start us off on this one. I'm gonna say 45th.
I was going to say 48th.
Okay.
I was going to say 46th in elementary reading scores and math scores. We're looking at probably late 20s for 8th grade math and reading.
Okay.
I think Senator Bonham looked at my paper because he's right on the money, 45th. So
Nice job. Way to
I
redeem
did
yourself.
not look at the paper, but you notice how bad I am at this that he accused me of cheating. I got one right.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just right big.
Let's see where we're at.
alrighty. So the next one is where does Oregon rank in overall K through 12 school safety? This one was really interesting to me. I didn't think about
safety.
that. Yeah.
Okay, I need a hint here.
Yeah, what is school safety?
What
What quantifies?
factors are we looking at?
So that's the thing. I would assume overall the safety of the students, like fights, altercations, things like that.
Because if you look at bullying,
Yeah, exactly.
if you look at those kinds of issues, it's tough sledding
Yeah.
out there in Oregon schools.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. And both of these questions are according to Coin News as well. So
Okay. Channel 6.
Channel 6.
I got a number. I'm locked in.
This one's a little harder for me because I'm trying to figure out whether or not we've had incidents that would artificially bump this number. But yeah, I've got a number 2.
We'll let you go first since you're locked in. Boomer, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to give us the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say 38th.
Okay. That's a good guess.
I know in my district, a lot of money has gone into particularly elementary level and making sure that when people walk in, they walk into the office and then they're allowed in the rest of the schools. So I think there's been major improvements. I'm going to say 30th.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on that same track because I know a lot of schools have taken the time to develop a plan, implement
Yeah.
a plan, change how many entrances, ingress, egress. I'm going to say 25th,
Okay.
middle of the pack.
Leader Drazan gets this one. We're 44th,
Oh, wow.
which that's
That actually
why
surprises me.
I thought that was very interesting.
Well, and I think that might be less about the school safety features, which I think have happened across the nation, and a little bit more about the culture in our schools, because we have a real problem in our schools with bullying and actual altercations, and safety in the classroom is a real problem. So I think that might be some of it, not knowing the criteria.
I think we're a little behind times, particularly in some of the high schools. You know, they've got, I hate to think about having it there, but metal detectors and those kinds of things, which don't seem to be as prevalent in Oregon schools as in other states. And I think, unfortunately, we're coming to the point that we're going to need to do that.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
This is grim.
I know it is. We call it a game, but at the end of the day, it's not really a fun game, you know. But we're marching on. So where does Oregon rank in overall K through 12 school funding and resources?
I got a
I'm ready.
number. All right, you first.
Boomer, you got to go first.
Top 10,
Which number? Pick one. We're gonna
10.
Okay.
I'm going to go slightly lower at 15.
I'll go 17 just to mix it up.
Leader Drazan is the winner of the game today.
Not surprised.
The number is 20th.
20th.
Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to take into factor was the, as compared to per
Okay.
capita income, I think if you,
You're doing the Bruce,
Yeah.
Senator Starr routine.
I was gonna peg you at DBS for that one, but okay, if it's Star, I get that too.
So now we'll kind of dive into the actual numbers and the budget stuff. So Oregon Department of Education, by the numbers, they've got 960 rules, which is 755 pages. And then we'll go into...
but before we just
Yeah.
slide past, like
No.
it continues to baffle me. We do pass laws that pertain to how we educate our kids. But then for those laws to take 755 pages to explain and implement and outline, that's insane to me.
Yeah, and our school districts, it's interesting. We talk all the time about the regulatory environment for businesses. Our schools are buried in regulation. They were extremely buried during the COVID era when they had OHA plus ODE plus, but it hasn't gotten better for them. I mean, they got to get permission to, like do anything there.
I would love to see a correlation between school success. We just confirmed we're in the 40s, not doing super well, and the amount of regulation. Like our states that are freer, that offer more autonomy, doing better. They doing we don't have that information tonight, but I'm now gonna figure that out because I'm curious.
Well, and on top of that, who enforces? Are there enforcement mechanism? And if there is, do they go to the schools and help them improve?
And to be clear, do we even know that these rules are actually about academic performance and that they're not about political agenda? That's my thing is, okay, 960 rules. I bet a good percentage of those rules I don't even want for my schools. I mean, we talk to school board members all the time who say, I ran for school board because I want to be there for the kids. And I want to stand up for the kids. And I don't believe it's political. I don't believe it's partisan. I got in the job. I can't do anything. Everything's mandated from Salem.
Yeah.
All I can do is make small changes in the budget and negotiate against the OEA who kicks our butt every single time. And they want to have flexibility. They want to do right by the kids. And instead, they feel hamstrung at a school board level. And I know at a district and classroom level, too.
Summer of 18, I was relatively newly appointed state rep, invited out to an Eastern Oregon academic, education conference. It was K through higher ed. And the amount of teachers that said, we're forced to fill out forms, we're forced to submit information to the extent that I don't think anybody's reading it. So I fill out, Jabba the Hutt or Star Wars references with my answers, and no one's calling me back to say, why did you fill out this form
that's
incorrectly?
devastating.
And so it started to become a question, right? That was early, like I just knew the legislature. So anybody wanting to engage in conversations about education, I would ask them, hey, when you fill out these forms, how serious do you take it? And the vast majority are saying, these are jokes. We send this to a bureaucrat in Salem. They're clearly not reviewing it because they're not getting back to us. There's no interaction. There's no action plan to take steps to correct any of the stuff that we're putting on these forms. So why am I filling out the form? Because we get these rules that tell us we have to. There's a requisite to draw down federal funds, so we have to have the form submit. And so we've got a bunch of bureaucrats checking boxes in a lot of cases. And I'm not saying that's writ large across the entire agency, but I am suspicious of how much money we spend on middle-level management and not in the classroom educating kids.
Well, if we even look at testing for years and years and years, we had tested the kids and then we sent it in. And then 6 months later, we get results. Well, the kids have moved on.
Long gone.
They don't tell us that, okay, in this area, you didn't do well. So here's our suggestion. Have you looked at the curriculum?
Right.
Why did we do that way? But they would never tell us. And so you just flipped it out the window. I mean, it was worthless, except to beat us over our head with it if we didn't do well. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Okay, so I don't typically say great things about the governor. Like, I own that. But the education accountability thing that she's put out there, I don't agree with a whole bunch of it. But they do have interim assessments in there. And interim assessments let teachers in real time get results back for actual students in their classroom when they're still in the classroom. And I appreciate that.
I do too. And I don't always agree with the governor either. But I was.
Thank you for that, Boomer.
I was appointed to the Governor's Council on Literacy K-5. And one of the things that happened that I have been harping on for years and years is the idea that our teacher prep programs, except maybe for EOU, are not as good as they should be. I'll be nice. And the idea that when our teachers come out from our teacher prep schools, the elementary teachers need to know how to teach reading. Absolutely. It's not theory. Absolutely. We don't need theory. You can't stand in front of your kids on that first day and say, well, theory says that, you guys all should sit in your seat and be actively involved and work with and listen to the teacher and do everything I say. Yeah, how far that's going to go? Yeah. Half the time you're trying to get the little darlings their butt in the seat so you can work. And besides all the interruptions that you have during the day. Yeah. So the concept is we did come up with standards that we shipped off to our teacher prep schools, the 17 of them, with the idea that by 2027, you will be teaching teachers how to teach reading. Now, I've been harping about math too, and hopefully that'll come next. But I do agree with the governor on those ideas. And then with accountability, there's also another mechanism that also says they're going to get, through the ESDs, they're going to get people who are trained in the science of reading to be able to go into the classroom for those teachers who don't already know how to do the science of reading and teach teachers how to teach. Yeah. And that'll be the salvation of reading in Oregon, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so for families out there, this is a good 2-year period to put your kids in private school. Because what I heard was that between now and 2027, we don't have confidence that our teacher training programs are necessarily teaching the science of reading. And my understanding is moving away from phonics, moving away from science of reading, which isn't just phonics, that's not all it is. I don't want to dumb it down. But that it was a political decision that, when we had George Bush in the White House, you had opposition from teachers' unions at that time to everything that they were wanting to do for schools, and they threw the baby out with the bathwater. And we were left with this sad, sad version of how to teach our kids to read that didn't work for years and years and years. And I have 3 kids, And my oldest is out of college. My youngest just graduated high school. But the difference from what my oldest kid was learning to my youngest kid for what they brought home to learn to read in those early years in school. I mean, don't be telling me that my kid should be looking at this picture and guessing what that word is.
Right.
It was the most
Cueing.
ridiculous thing. It's called cueing. And that was okay with the classroom. That was how he was supposed to be doing it. And I found that to be the most ridiculous thing. But I mean, we need teachers to know how to teach. And the fact that we're still having conversations about let's make sure that our colleges are teaching our teachers how to teach reading and math kind of scares me about for the future of our state, and also reinforces why we need school choice, why we need more options in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Why we need families to be able to be in charge, and kids shouldn't be limited by their address.
You know, what concerns me is I'm starting seeing articles, particularly coming across my desk, that talk about the end of public schools. Public schools are failing. The concept that people are starting to think that public schools has served its purpose and now we need to move on. I think there'll always be a place for public schools. My concern is that it never become a dumping ground, that it's only for kids who can't go anyplace else. And that concerns me greatly. It also concerns me that the idea, and I'm totally for choice, I just want to make sure that we're just not moving kids around the Titanic. Is it sinking? The concept is, if I'm going to move my kids to this particular place for an education, how can I ensure that they're getting what they need?
I do think the parallel, and forgive me for digressing half a minute here, but if you look at countries that have moved to a state-run healthcare system.
I knew you were going to say healthcare.
But it is. The wealthy people create their own healthcare system. They go into folks that will privately serve them. So the guy that does the knee replacement for the NBA player is not the one that you go to from the general public. Like, that's a separate guy that you don't have access to. And the woman that's the specialist that's going to deliver your baby with the greatest of care, and you don't get access to her. You go somewhere else. And so education's kind of stuck in the same spot. Like, we've created the system. We've started to make it so bad that the people that have means are looking to go elsewhere. And we've somehow conflated the racism is tantamount to choice. Like, if you want choice, then you're a racist. Like, you're leaving the poor kids behind. And the reality is no, no, no. If you go to any national seminar where they're talking about choice and you see the inner city kids come forward and say, I'm only where I am because I had choice. I'm only where I am because my mom saw the problem that was in this particular high school and got me into this other school. And I got to go there because this voucher system existed. We couldn't afford it, but we were able to because of this allowance that was given to us and granted, and the dollars followed me. So where I went, the dollars went. And again, we're going to get into the budget here. We're going to go straight to the budget right now. This is a good segue, because when you look at the amount of money we're spending per pupil, we can afford a private education system.
And the one of the advantages of that is for teachers too, and though a lot of them don't realize, all of a sudden, if I want as a teacher to get out of the public school system, teach kids at home, either virtually or whatever, and I can do the voucher system, and let's say, I get $8,000 a kid. If I can get 15 kids, I'm making almost double what I would have made if I was teaching public school. So there are advantages in the system for teachers to do some things differently.
And I think my thinking on choice has always been to strengthen our public school system. I have never looked at it as anything that would undermine our public school system. I've always looked at it as a way to strengthen it. And I think that intent and that commitment has to be navigated super carefully. But I do think that that needs to be a part of this conversation, that there's a way to say we can center our education conversation, as we hear all the time from Democrats, they center stuff all the time, right? Well, I'd like to do that in this case on the student instead of the bureaucracy. And too often we talk about budgets relative to the service levels and, what are we going to do? We're going to have to cut, and it's all because of these expenses and overhead, and therefore we're going to have larger class sizes. I think that we need to have conversations about kids and outcomes and how much it's going to cost to teach a kid. much more so than the perpetual conversations we have about the quality education model or current service level. Because I think what we're doing right now, we've heard from the beginning of this conversation about how we're doing in the numbers. What we're doing, status quo isn't working. It's not serving everybody. So, money matters, but I think that we need to start to think about this differently.
And the concept of the top-down direction, and I'm a little concerned about the accountability. I hope it's not another George Bush type thing, and at risk, or No Child Left Behind. If you look at the school districts and or the states that have done well, like Mississippi, who have made a remarkable recovery, but it's taken them 10 years.
Shout out to Mississippi.
Yeah. They went from bottom of the barrel, even lower than we are, to midstream. And that's a huge way to go. But the concept is that they got into the classroom and counted upon the teachers to get what they need training-wise and the materials to be able to teach the kids. It's the practice. We got to get away from policy and focus more on practice.
Beautiful. Well said. Alex, walk us through this real quick.
Yeah. So we do have a breakdown. This is the 2023-2025 ODE budget. And it's broken down, as you can see, through federal funds, lottery funds, overall school funding, grant and aid district supports, and all these other funds right down here for early learning and all this stuff. And we've got it broken down real nice. Shout out to Ty Visner, another Doge bro, for providing us with this graph too.
So jump to the next one.
This is the governor's recommended budget, same kind of style for 2025 and 2027. So an additional almost 1.4 billion coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So we just had our Ways and Means budget hearing on the
this.
school K through 12 school budget on Friday, and we effectively affirmed that number right there
We did. We all gave it a thumbs up. Yeah.
with some caveats.
Yes. Yes.
There was one big caveat for me.
Yeah.
DEI.
Oh, interesting.
I said we have a problem in our schools in meeting the needs of our children and our teachers, and we're spending $15 million for a department that I haven't seen results for our BIPOC community that actually mean something. They're still in the same place that everybody else is. So I don't know where the money's going and what they're doing. I have asked Director Williams to visit their department and talk to them about what's going on there. But our BIPOC community is not experiencing, I feel, the necessary support they need to be successful.
Interesting. Yeah. So that didn't come up in the budget hearing on Ways and Means. We didn't talk about that at all. We didn't talk about the potential threat to federal investment because of that as well. I know the Trump administration has made quite clear that they don't want.
As Christine said, let's take a look at outcomes.
Yeah.
If whatever department, whatever agency, if the outcomes stay the same and they just need more money and they keep getting more money and nothing changes, I'll show you these slow people. And that's sometimes the legislature.
We are not always on the cutting edge of where we need to be. And I have always had an axe to grind with the Educator Advancement Council. Personally, I served on Ways and Means Ed Sub in my first year, and it was nascent at the time. And it was a tiny, tiny, tiny reference in the budget. And the intent seemed very focused on getting teachers in that reflected the racial kind of breakdown of any given school. And it felt a little bit like code language, Educator Advancement Council. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I didn't know what to trust, what to think of it. It has continued to disappoint me for its approach. It's grown massively from those early days, and now they've restructured it so that it's not like a memorandum of understanding kind of an organization, and it's formalized and it's in statute and it has a massive budget compared to what it used to. So if you just talk to me about the fact that we need good teachers to be trained, we need people to get into this workforce, I'm there. I'm all in. But this is, $24,000 and giving teachers tuition, free tuition, and all this kind of really, really, really expensive stuff. And it's kind of handpicking winners and losers for who has access to this professional development and who has sort of this glide path to professional advancement. And I just have never been comfortable with it structurally.
And I agree with that. I did have some conversations with the department heads, and I said, with the governor's emphasis on literacy K-5, you are then going to work with the ESDs and provide training, as they did in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Training for those teachers who don't have the skills to teach the science of reading. And I got a yes.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged because we need to do that, and the sooner the better. And I will be watching them.
So the big caveat that did come up in the budget conversation, the asterisk, was the governor has made a big stink about accountability. We're not just going to throw money at the problem. We need to see change. And so at this point, we have the largest investment in K through 12 we've ever had. This is a massive amount of money. There's a caveat to that too, though, right? When you extract PERS growth, PERS obligation, in this biennium, the PERS obligation to the school district budget is about $2.27 billion. That's massive. So we had
growing.
Yeah, and we had this considerable growth in terms of what we're investing in the budget, and of the $760 million growth or whatever, 640 of it ish is gobbled up by the increased PERS obligation. And this also includes this weird thing where we had this side account
accounts
that we the state had created that had $174 million ish in that account, and we had the opportunity to either put it into the global PERS investment fund, and Director Olenek said it actually won't do much in that $100 billion fund, but if you gave it to schools this year, it would actually offset their obligation, and it would be very impactful. So this is the retiree that has, million plus in the retirement account that comes across an old checking account. They forgot about the 10 grand, and they just, whacked up their car, and they need to go pay for the car repair. And instead of throwing the 10 grand into the long-term investment, which is the better financial decision, they say, well, I might as well just use this to fix my car. That's where our school districts are. There's this $174 million that we could put into a long-term investment, but instead we have to offset the current burden to make sure that the investment that we are giving is maximized today.
My school districts are just struggling from PERS costs. The side account problem is a real problem, and the legislature declined to address it, even though they all came forward and said, help, whatever you give us is going to be diluted by this, help.
Well, and they also said, I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago we said to the part-time classified employees that know that they're seasonal,
oh yeah,
you can have unemployment benefits in summertime. You can have unemployment benefits during spring break, Christmas break. So even though and part of the reason you may have been motivated to have the job was so that your calendar tracked the school year. Yeah. We're going to give you unemployment benefits. Tigard School District, a friend of mine works there, a guy I went to college with, said, that's a $2 million hit.
It's huge.
Thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing down there?
And then 916 today.
And 916 today.
Floor.
Boomer had some opinions about this.
Yeah, he did. That was my segue for Boomer. How are you feeling about this?
Well, I've cooled down a little bit now, and I'm feeling better. The idea all comes back, as far as I'm concerned, and I segue back to PERS. In 1972, when I started teaching, there wasn't a whole lot of money either. But so what school districts did was to say, well, we don't have the money to pay your salaries, at least not much.
Can't
I
give
think
you a
we got
6% raise.
3% raise, I think,
Yeah.
every year or something.
Yeah.
And so what they said, well, then could we get benefits? And of course, at that time, benefits were cheap. They were cheap. So they gave us more and more benefits and PERS and those kinds of things instead of salary increases. And then all of a sudden, that's where we are. And that's why we're having the problems
Here
that
we
we're
are.
having now. And I don't know how you ever reverse that. I'm not sure you can. But anyway, that's why we're there. As far as 966 is concerned, again, what we've done is not, as a legislature, not really looked at how schools and or ODE and in education in general is spending money and taking a look at the outcomes. And then we say, well, how do we support our teachers? Well, one of the things we can do is if they go on strike, then they're going to starve to death, and the school boards are just they're not as nice as we'd like them to be, because they just don't give us the amount of money that we need to survive, and so that's kind of the outlook that people talk about when, as you mentioned earlier, that as a school board member, you get on there and you find out you can't do much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all locked into collective bargaining and regulations from the state and those kinds of things. So all that happens is now you've given more control to the unions, very simply, in that they can strike as long as they want to now, and they still get paid one another. And on top of that, when they finish striking, then normally you can negotiate for back pay.
I was told by Rep Bowman not to reference somebody that's not in the room, but he said they did the research and schools always negotiate for back pay.
Always.
Always.
That's what we were told as well.
Yeah.
And one of the representatives said that, well, school districts always have 20% rainy day funds anyway. I don't know of one school district
Yeah.
anywhere that has 20%. The OSBA recommends 10, but I don't know any school district that has 10% rainy day fund.
And I always gripe about ending fund balances for all these various school districts too, though, because the legislature stretches to give them whatever money we can give them, and then they squirrel away 10% off the top or whatever to put in their own reserves. I know you need cash flow. I know you have to even things out, but I thought that was part of why they went 49%, 51% to address some of those cash flow issues for our schools. And so if you look at the total number across all of our districts across the state, including ESDs, there's a lot of money squirreled away in accounts that isn't going into the classroom and is just driving conversations for us about, hey, why don't you take the kicker? Hey, why don't you raise taxes? Hey, there's not enough money to do anything. We need more money from Oregonians, when we're all sitting on an ending fund balances. The legislature is, schools are, agencies are. Everybody is sitting on fat reserves. Maybe not that fat, maybe not 20%, but people have, they have their mad money. They've got the backup. And I appreciate that they do, but also that drives the question for us too.
But my biggest beef with 916,
Let's hear it.
if the teachers can negotiate for back pay, if they can receive the money from the funds that the labor unions squirrel away as well, they've got their own rainy day funds in case of strike.
fund.
Strike funds. They can be made whole. They can be gone 3-4 weeks, but the school year doesn't get extended 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
It's not treated like a snow day. Like you don't exceed snow days. We went past 6, so we're going to stay an extra week of school. No, that strike is just, it's part of your regular contracted daily amount of contract days that you have, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
So the only people that get punished are the students.
Yeah, it's the
The
kids.
students miss out on 3 weeks a month, 6 weeks of learning, and the teachers, in the name of what? In the name of wanting to have a better opportunity to educate kids. It's always about the kids until it's not.
Yeah.
It's always about the kids until I need to make a little bit more money and I need better resources in the classroom. And today's kids can suffer in the name of a greater cause for tomorrow. Let's jump into
Let's keep going.
ODE problems. Sorry, we're filibustering this.
Not meaning to.
No, it's all great conversation. So these are just a couple of key problems that I wanted to highlight. Number one being low graduation rates. Oregon has one of the lowest high school graduation rates in the United States.
Can I just say that's even after gaming what it means to get a diploma from our schools?
Amen.
So there you go.
You mean the participation award?
It's a participation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In recent years, it's improved, hovering around 81 to 83%, but it still trails the national average of about 86%. Number two is chronic absenteeism.
Can we
Which
stop?
also-
Let's stop on number one real quick. Let's go back to low graduation. I'm just going to read you
word
this
salad.
story headline here. She graduated from high school with honors, but can't read or write.
Oh my
now
gosh,
she's
this story,
suing.
so shocking. I was shocked by that story. I mean, I wasn't shocked that it happens. I was shocked that somebody said, I deserve better and I am going to sue.
19 years old and dreams one day of writing stories and maybe even a book. And you would think that would be a reasonable thing for a high school graduate to want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And she's saying, but I can't read or write. My question to you is, where did this story take place?
I don't know. I don't
Well,
know what
was it
state
here in
was.
Oregon?
Well, the concept
know.
is
Was it?
we're
No,
moving kids along.
It was Connecticut.
Okay.
But again, it wasn't,
Yeah.
you had to stop
We're
and
not
think,
holding kids accountable.
Because
but
it
you
could have been.
you could have, oh, that
It
could have
could
been
have
Oregon.
been here.
Like,
It could have been
honestly,
here.
before we got on the podcast, we read this article and we are like, this could easily
Yeah.
be Oregon. This could easily be a graduate of our current system because there is no expectation of competency.
Yeah.
There is no expectation of proficiency. There's only the expectation that you attend.
Period. Okay, and speaking of attendance, I know he's listed chronic absenteeism here, but I just want to flag, I should have looked this up because I knew this was coming, but we recently saw articles about chronic absenteeism for teachers and that our kids are getting this rotating cast of substitutes in the classroom and that teachers are also absent from the classroom, which has got to also contribute to some of the learning loss and some of the challenges and disrupted learning. But yeah, absenteeism rates, it's real. It's a cultural challenge we have here in the state of Oregon after almost 2 years of shutdowns from COVID.
And as a substitute teacher for 5 years, you can't believe how many movies I've watched.
Yeah, that classroom time isn't the same, you're telling us.
I'm telling you that I showed a lot of movies.
So the
and
teacher
videos.
prescribes to you, hey, if you're going to substitute today, can you show this video?
you don't, and I understand. You know, I mean, I'm not there to teach you English. I would be terrible at it. In fact, I found out I was terrible at it. And the kids laughed at me.
Kids, if
and
you're
I said,
listening,
well, hey, you
boomers,
guys are smarter
sorry.
than I am. But the idea is that you're right. When a teacher leaves, learning stops.
Yeah.
And the substitutes is a poor replacement. They're just there to keep the kids safe. That's what they tell me. Just keep the kids safe and busy.
So again,
Like a babysitter.
my late wife was an HR director for a K through 12 school district. And originally, let's look at the pool of employees to be a teacher. You have to have a postgraduate degree, right? We don't want you unless you've got this advanced degree. The pool starts to diminish. Well, if you've got a college degree, we'd love to have you come. If you got a bachelor's degree, if you got an associate, if you graduated from high school, we would love to have you come substitute. If you've ever thought about being a teacher, come on in, apply. But again, as the pool diminished of who wanted to be in this profession, which is a challenge, right?
It is a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Talked to a principal friend of mine that I went to high school with. He's out on the coast, and he said, you have no idea the challenges our kids are facing today. This was back when we were doing the student success. Because I was like, should we prescribe to you, we the legislature, because we're in our infinite wisdom, we know all, we're
Yeah, we
going to
do.
raise this couple $2 billion. Should we tell you how to spend it? And he was like, no, but based on what you guys talked to us about when you came to town, you clearly saw the need for the emotional wellness support, like the counseling, like outside the classroom investment was necessary because of all the social problems that these kids are having today, which I partially blame on
Yeah.
phones,
I voted for that.
access
I voted for the bill so that bell to bell, kids with exceptions didn't have access to their phones because I think it's disruptive.
I'm a freedom and liberty guy too, and I'm sitting here saying social media. We did suicide awareness, youth suicide awareness, the bill that Rep. Elmer put forward and came over to the Senate floor today. We voted on that. And I'm thinking, I can't imagine that trauma through social media wasn't part of this child's life experience.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very sad.
So anyway, we're talking about a lot of things that aren't, again, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. We're talking about the diminishing barriers to entry to become a teacher. There are a lot of scary trends in this, and a lot of them are tied back to COVID.
There's a lot of COVID linger. And we haven't even talked about what we also know happens in the classroom, which means some of these kids that have behavioral challenges that have not yet been tested or identified to have access to the exact supports that they need, that they're in the classroom. And teachers, instead of having resources to be able to manage the behavior of one kid, takes all the kids out of the classroom. They call them room clears. And we have legislation in front of us this session that addresses some of these issues and leaves schools off the conversation. Leave schools the way they are, for teachers to pull all those kids, all those littles out of the classroom and leave the one kid in there that's struggling with behavior management issues. So schools, if we're talking teacher shortages, if we're talking a culture of absenteeism, if we're talking a lack of strong curriculum, a lack of good teacher training to be able to, convey that strong curriculum in a way that's effective, there's a lot of reasons that aren't just money for why Oregon schools are really in a bad way right now.
Common sense too, when as a principal, when we initiated a new reading program, new math program, social studies, whatever it was, in my school, I brought in the substitutes the first of the year, paid them to come in and get the same training the teachers did, so that when they were there, they knew what to do and they understood what was going on. It's just little things like that. I don't think some people don't remember how important it is. You got to involve those people so everybody that comes into the school understands what they're there for and how to do those things.
Interestingly, so my daughter, who is a school psychologist, her husband is I guess teacher's aide, teacher's assistant, education assistant. I think he's an EA, I think is what they're calling him now. So my daughter trying to get kids into a review process to see if they merit an IEP.
Yep.
And then the amount of absenteeism that stops those meetings from taking place. Like, how do I have a meeting with a kid to evaluate this kid when they're only there a day a week, 2 days a week at best? I'm supposed to be testing this kid today. I don't know whether or not they're going to show up. That's a consistent thing as, we visit.
Wow.
And then my son-in-law, too, says, okay, well, I've got this IEP, and I see all these things I'm supposed to be doing. But I only get an hour with this kid. And so I'm doing this. Who's doing the rest of this stuff? And, of course, my daughter's like,
No one.
you are.
Yeah.
Like, that's you. That's what you're supposed to be doing. He's like, how can I do all of this in the short amount of time that I'm allotted? And she's like, I don't know, but I'm telling you that the system is designed that you're the person that's supposed to be helping the kid do all of it.
So in one family, they can identify the problem pretty clearly. But the other thing about what you just described that is also interesting and challenging is, let's say that this kid does get identified, they get tested, they do need the IEP. If you don't solve the absenteeism problem, it's gonna get twisted around whether or not what's going on is a lack of learning related to inadequate supports for their individual education plan, or if it's more related to their absenteeism, the fact they're not physically in the classroom learning. So I don't know how I don't know how much progress you can make with a student that has a need for special supports if they don't come.
Yeah, the third reason here, achievement gaps. Students of color, English learners, and those from low-income families often perform below their peers, and significant disparities exist in reading and math proficiency, especially in middle school.
Black students, the numbers for Black students in Oregon continue to make my heart sink. Like, they are just well below other communities. And also homeless students, as you can imagine, is another category of students that continue to just really face real substantial struggles. So, yeah, it continues to be a problem that's going to require very, very targeted strategic response interventions.
Let's just pause on that for 1 second. Let's go through the next couple, if you would, Alex, and then we're going to get into a kind of a comparison of Oregon and Florida, and then we'll come back to that.
Shoot, you guys are bumming me. You're comparing us to Florida. Okay, I'm ready.
So number 4 on this list, underfunding and large class sizes. Oregon spends less per student than many neighboring states. School districts frequently report overcrowded classrooms, outdated materials, and a shortage of support staff like counselors and special ed aides. And then number 5 is teacher shortages, especially in rural areas and in special education, math and science, or burnout and lack of competitive pay drive high turnover as well.
Before we go to the next thing, can I push back on this a little bit? Do
Well,
you buy this?
No.
I don't buy this.
No. Yeah, we're reporting some
What
of
ODE
these
is telling
slides.
us.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't buy this at all.
Yeah. This is self-evaluation from an agency, from a department, telling us what
Exactly.
Yeah, this is what's being put forward to the legislature. So if you're serving on the education committee,
This is what you see.
is what you're
This is
hearing.
what you saw.
Yeah.
Because this is not factually accurate based on information I've seen. So I feel a little bit like they're gaslighting us.
Yeah, let's compare Oregon and Florida.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. So national rankings and performance. Florida often outperforms Oregon in standardized testing and graduation rates. Florida has seen national praise for improving outcomes, especially for low-income and minority students. The national ranking K through 12, Oregon is middle to lower tier nationally, typically ranks 30th to 40th, which we saw in the game at 44th. But Florida is in a higher tier. It often ranks in the top 10 or 15. The NAEP scores of 2022, Oregon was slightly below the national average, and Florida is generally at or above the national average. And Oregon's graduation rate as of 2023 was 81%, and Florida was 87%.
And I bet they have a real diploma.
That's the thing. I'm glad you
don't
highlighted
they?
that. I'm glad you highlighted that.
Well, what happened, as I understand it, is that Mississippi, and I'll bring it up again, started this process in 2013. Louisiana then saw what was happening, the improvement that was going on, and so they adopted it. And then Florida adopted what Louisiana and Mississippi had done.
There you
so
go.
this is just, hey, it's working, let's use it.
Yeah.
Which sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's
you'd
do
hope so.
more of that.
Yeah. And then this is where it gets even more interesting. So onto the pure pupil spending. So Oregon is about $21,000 per pupil, and we have roughly 550,000 students. Florida spends $12,000 per pupil, and they have 2.37 million students. But yet their scores are so much higher.
Yeah, we're high cost, low outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're that.
So proof of a false narrative.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I was looking at that other thing saying, whose world is that?
exactly.
That is crazy. And why in the committee did somebody say, whoa, I have actual numbers, you're wrong.
Well, we thought about putting, reality on the slide deck, but we thought, the viewer should get to see what we see.
Yeah.
That's fair.
You should get to see how it's being reported to us. So the agency comes in, oh my gosh, we're underfunded, we're overcrowded, we're overworked.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do this work. Our teachers are underpaid. We're in the top 15 in the nation in terms of compensation.
Yeah.
And again, that's not adjusted for cost of living, not to make my argument of how the rankings work, because we do run into that a little bit with the ranking in terms of quality of education, right? Not everybody measures it exactly the same. And so the reason why we're saying we're between 30th and 45th, it's because depends on which website. You mentioned the NAEP. It's like it's a national ranking.
Yeah.
It's like a report card. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but
It's kind of the gold standard.
And the interesting thing, right, to add to that conversation, it's the Oregon funding is moderate, but it's often criticized as insufficient, which is what you guys are hearing in your committee hearings.
Yeah.
And going back to the game again, I mean, we're 20th in overall school funding based off all 50 states too. So I mean, we're in the top tier or the top 20. And in Florida, it's the investment is lower per student, but they still can provide strong outcomes, strong graduation rates. So there is a way to do it. Is what this is telling us.
Well, not to get off topic too much, but man, I was in a conversation with somebody the other day about ODOT, which isn't what we're talking about today, but they said the way ODOT does one thing is the way ODOT does everything. And I feel like the way Oregon does one thing is the way Oregon does everything. So if you look at healthcare in Oregon.
The Oregon way.
Well, unfortunately, it's become low utilization, high cost in healthcare. If you look at our healthcare, we're low utilization, high cost. If you look at schools, we are high cost, low outcome. If you look at highway spending, we are poor outcomes, high cost. Like if you pick any particular issue set, behavioral health, access to addiction services, housing, homelessness response, we are high cost, low outcome. I'm not loving that. That theme is one that I think that that's the important thing about these kinds of conversations is that it has to change, and it can't change unless people realize this is failed leadership. This is how we've been doing things is super expensive, and that's cost of living that you were referencing. That's what drives cost of living. It's got to change. We've at least got to get some return on the investment we're making.
But people are willing to pay more for a better product.
100%.
And I asked this question, I got into a little bit of trouble on social media a few years back because I said, if government had to pitch to you and sell to you what they were providing, what would you be willing to pay? Fortunately for them, they tax you and you don't have a choice. But if I said, here's the academic performance, come to my school. I want to attract you and your child to come to my school. Could they make that pitch? $21,000 a year I need to get from you to bring your child to my school. Now, of course, that's not how taxes work. You individually aren't paying all that freight because, there's wealth disparity and whatnot. But still, $21,000 per student. You made the comment earlier. I want to go find 100 students.
Yeah. Or
Give
15.
me 2.1 million and see if I
30.
can,
And there are amazing private schools out there.
Yeah.
If you look at the Youth Challenge school over in Bend, it's run by the Air Force. They take kids that are kind of marginal kids, and most of them are BIPOC, and they work with them, credit recovery and graduation credits, and they have a 98% graduation rate.
Wow.
These kids, my son is in the Air Force, and he oversaw the 42 of these schools across the country, and they are amazing. But that's not by themselves. There are other private schools that are doing some amazing things, and I think that's why choice is so important.
Yeah. Good segue into the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, and continuing on with the Oregon compared to Florida, to hit on that point, school choice in Oregon, as we all know, limited small charter sector. In Florida, it's extensive charters, vouchers, ESAs, private school vouchers in Oregon, minimal. And in Florida, it's widespread family empowerment scholarships. So that's definitely part of the recipe for, a successful education system.
And based on those numbers, it also shows that choice doesn't leave kids behind in the public schools.
Bingo.
Because their public schools are succeeding. I mean, the private schools exist, it's extensive, and the public schools are strong. It doesn't have to be a threat.
When I first came in the legislature, my staff gave me a book called Our Kids. Robert Putnam, it was I want to say 1953 Port Clinton, Ohio case study of upward mobility. Kids from everywhere, wrong side of the tracks, affluent neighborhoods, and all of them had somebody that they could point to within the high school that kind of wrapped their arms around them, but helped them achieve. And then started looking at modern day examples. One of them was the eastern side of Bend, Oregon, inner city Atlanta, some different areas around the United States that he compared and contrasted. But when the timber industry left and men weren't working, drugs, alcoholism, other abuse came into families, absenteeism went through the roof, and you started to see scores decline. And then throughout the book, he's trying to figure out what's the difference today versus what it was then. And one of the things he points to that I find interesting, and if you look around Oregon, I think you'll find a lot of this to be true, is we have organized our neighborhoods by class.
Yeah, we have. Land use has done that too.
And then within that framework, those neighborhoods then feed the elementary school system.
Yeah.
And then, so if you live on the wrong side of the tracks here in Oregon,
Literally.
you're going to a school that's more impoverished, that has, higher rates of chronic absenteeism, has different family structures at home that then don't come with family supports.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder to achieve. Not impossible, but more difficult. And then by doing that too, you leave affluent people, Westland, Lake Oswego, where they can pass a levy. School needs more money.
Great point.
We're not getting enough money from the state
That's a great
school
point.
system. Let's put it to the ballot. We've had in the Dalles where I live, we've been trying to build a new high school since I've lived there. Can't get it passed. A lot of people say, "Hey, I paid for that school when my kids were in school. It's time for you to pay for." Well, we all need to pay for it. Like the bottom line is the community needs to pay for a new high school. And of course, the state has not helped in this matter because we think everybody deserves a better wage. And if you pay more in business and labor, we see it all the time. We got to raise the Davis-Bacon wage for whatever. And so then it's prevailing wage. And if you're someone that hangs sheetrock, I'd rather pay you $55 so I know your family's making good money, even though you're willing to hang it for $20 an hour. I got to pay you better because you're counting on me to take care of you. And so now the school, new construction cost is hundreds of millions of dollars. We can't afford it. People can't afford the taxes on it.
Yeah.
But in order to take care of the one guy that's the contractor that wants to build, we got to take care of the labor unions to increase wages and benefits and all the things. We made it too expensive to then build that school. But it all kind of does come back to this question of how do we overcome this disparate investment in communities because of where you live geographically. And I have always said I thought school choice overcame that.
Yeah, I feel the same. And the other thing, I think we're going to see this get worse and worse and worse in this era of massive spending in low income, 30% AMI housing across our state. Because the way our public schools are structured, you're going to have, just as an example, say Gresham. Gresham has a disproportionate number of project turnkey projects that have, kind of turned our hotels into homeless housing. They are getting an awful lot of low-income housing out there. And so you are creating high density, and you're creating high density that is targeted to low-income families. You're not mixing it up. You're not going to have middle-income, low-income, high-income within...
It's a great ringtone, actually.
Within a couple blocks of each other, going to that same school. I mean, I have no doubt that communities across our state that are struggling economically right now would love to see high-income housing built there, because then people will buy that beautiful house and it will improve their tax base and it will bring more people into their school district.
Yeah.
And you'll have this mix. You'll have the great kind of melting pot. But instead, through public investments and through land use, our school system has a homogenized version of student populations that impacts potentially outcomes, testing, classroom experience, all those things. I think that people are not connecting the dots enough to recognize we need school choice for that reason, but we also need to stop segregating people. We are segregating people based on wealth.
Well, we had the opportunity when, again, in 2017, you could choose to go across a district line.
Right, briefly.
We had open enrollment.
That was available, yep.
And if you, the parent, because we didn't guarantee that you would have the transit, right? We weren't going to send the school bus to you if you lived 3 miles out of the district. But if you, the parent, were willing to engage getting your child to school, you could go where you wanted to go.
Which is still public school, you just get choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sure enough, people were taking their kids. I live in Tigard. I go to work in Salem. I like this particular school on my way or in that final destination. I'm going to go ahead and drive you to school every day,
Yeah.
make that choice. And of course, there was backlash. Parents
Yeah.
said, why would you take this freedom away from me? But school districts were concerned that they were underperforming and that the money was following the student, because it was.
Yeah.
And so they were losing revenue. And they said, no, we got to have our revenue back. And instead of saying, I'm going to make my school a higher caliber school where you want to come, I'm going to drive you to seek attending my school because I am so wonderful in terms of my academic performance. We didn't do that. We just said, nope. Bureaucrats have decided we need to talk to the legislature. These schools are losing out on funding because they're not performing, and we got to send the kids back.
We have a monopoly. I don't like this bill.
This is not the first time we've talked about this one.
No, it's not. But it just got amended, so I thought we'd revisit it. And I'd like to hear all of your opinions and thoughts on House Bill 3365, which
Bad bill shouldn't have passed.
it's a little out there. Essentially, just to digest here, this act would make new laws with respect to updates to academic content standards in certain core subjects. The updates must include standards about the causes and effects of climate change within certain core subjects like math, right? So, what are your opinions and thoughts
I had a
on this one?
conversation this afternoon with the representatives from COSA, Confederate Oregon School Administrators, said that they had met with the representatives who sponsored this, and they came to a compromise. And that compromise, and don't quote me on this, but my understanding, it's only
quoting
now
you,
in
Boomer.
science.
Oh.
It's only in social studies, and I think that was in health.
Science, health, history, geography, economics, and civics.
Can I just say, though, health does not include comprehensive sex education? I mean, not to be too spicy, but somebody tell me how you're going to integrate climate change education in every category that's discussed in health. Am I missing something?
I was just thinking like a sample civics question. If Billy rides his bike to school for 4 days a week, how evil are Republicans?
Yeah. Yeah.
Years ago, when I was
The answer is 12.
years ago when I was a principal, I had this lady stomp into my office and indicate to me that our health curriculum was not very good, particularly when it dealt with drugs. And so she says, I have a drug curriculum by the such and such local group, and I want you to put it in. And it's only half hour a day, every day for 9 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I said,
That's
wonderful. And so she went on to tell me how wonderful it was. And so I said, why don't you sit down? Let's talk. And so I took out my schedule and I showed it to her and I said, okay, if you want this to happen, tell me which subject don't you want us to teach? And she looked at me.
I would have
like,
picked one or
what,
two.
What are you talking about? And I said, well, we do have a curriculum and we do teach health and we do all these things
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what don't you want me to teach? So she got it, to be very honest. She said, oh, I didn't realize. I said, yeah, you can't just say you're going to do this and you're going to add this, because when you do that, what's that song go? Every time you win, part of things that you lose.
I don't know this song, but I experience it every day.
Yeah.
I just am now blaming you for the cups on Senate President Wagner's desk that are labeled, general government, education, healthcare, and he forces you, if you want investment, to take marbles out of one
That's
and put it
you?
in the
Yeah.
You did that?
I'm just based on the concept he just
oh,
put
yeah.
forward.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Wagner heard
Make
about
the
Boomer.
choice.
Every time you
Hard
win, there's
choices.
something you lose.
Yeah. But this is where we are. I mean, this is what the Oregon legislature thinks is a priority in terms of education. That
We want
need to
to be
drive
the school board.
climate change curriculum. That we've got the DEI that we've heard about.
And how
Ron
does
DeSantis
How does
said,
this relate to outcomes? What is the outcome of this?
We have decided to indoctrinate our kids.
Or
Maybe.
yeah, that's
the outcome.
That's DeSantis, division, exclusion, indoctrination. That's
Yeah.
what he said DEI stood for.
yeah,
Yeah.
Scare kids.
I think we get activists from this.
But I also think kids are experiencing a lot more stress and a lot more anxiety. And I do think that issues like this are contributing factors.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to integrate this into every part of your life. You have to it's a jump scare. Everything you do, everywhere you go, you got to be afraid of the impacts of climate. And you are going to be the one responsible for killing the planet. What'd they say, 12 years left?
I have 10 years left. And
it was 8 years
my climate
ago.
fate is sealed when I'm 17 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very sad.
And again, how is that not child abuse?
I agree. A lot of things that we do, middle school, first off, the concept of middle school is not what it is today. And if you look at test scores, we lose ground in middle school.
Yeah.
And I understand to a certain extent. I spent 15 years in middle school. Those little darlings, I mean, the ladies could go from the heights of ecstasy to the depths of despair in the width of a hallway. I mean, they're laughing and they turn around and they start crying. I mean, the changes physically that happen. Now, the boys, it was always amazing because I taught 6th grade self-contained, and the boys never discovered girls till the spring. It was like, woo, where did they come from? In April and June. But in middle school, the second day of school, they're holding hands. Now, they don't know why. and they, but they are. So, and it's funny, but those kinds of changes and the impact on those young people when they're not ready for those changes and what's coming at them. I had a kid come in, a gangbanger from L.A. come in. He was a wannabe, but dressed in the chains, and he had his pants down below his butt. And in 1 week, I had a third of the school dressing like him and causing problems in classrooms. Fortunately, he left, and then they returned to normal. But the impact of those types of things at the middle school level to a certain extent is devastating.
So it's contagion.
And if you can't decide if you're a boy or girl, think about that at the middle school level.
Well, we've got serious issues.
Yeah, we do.
And I think one of the questions I have had is, where are we investing the money? If you look at it, and I don't have the chart with me, and I was trying to find it real quick on my iPad, but the growth in the administrative state, right? The middle management, non-teaching staff, teaching, investment has relatively plateaued, and we're growing, the upper echelons of management and not getting the money to the classroom. We've talked about PERS, we've talked about other obligations like unemployment benefits, but we're driving costs to the education system writ large, but we're not getting the dollar to the classroom.
Did you go back to that first slide? Mm-hmm. The first slide we had, how many pages?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How many pages? And who's
60
responsible for
rules,
making sure that
754.
happens? Administrators.
A lot of, middle managers. Admin.
So the more of these pages you have, then somebody has to
The
make
fewer
sure that
teachers.
it happens. And so you have to have not one administrator. The superintendent can't do it by himself. So you have principals can't do it by yourself. So that's what happens. So anytime you add rules, somebody has to make sure that they're in input in the school system, and you need more people.
Inverse relationship maybe between your rules and how many teachers you're able to hire for the classroom.
Yeah. When I was a principal, my sole goal was, if there are problems, I want to take it away from the teachers, and I'll deal with it so they can teach. I didn't have a tenth of what administrators do today.
You saw this week, Secretary Reed finished this audit of risks to improve K through 12 equity and student success. Boomer, you were in committee. You got this PowerPoint presentation. What, if anything, are we going to learn if we look through this report?
What stood out to you?
Well, It has to do with outcomes, very simply. We need to make sure that what we give to schools and or the Oregon Department of Education or even any agency is the idea that the outcomes have to be such that we have student success. And if we decide that these certain things are what we're looking at outcomes, then we have to have an organization that will say, okay, we have these communities, like you said, Senator, in where kids don't seem to come to school, they're not doing well, they don't have the facilities. Then why isn't there an organization that says our kids aren't successful? We need to go into those schools and help them be successful. There are some states that have come in and actually closed schools and taken over. Now, I'm not sure how successful that was, but at least it sets an example of saying, if you're not doing your job, then we're going to find people who do. And we're going to supply the materials and whatever support you need to help the kids be successful.
My gripe with this leadership, I don't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Yeah.
I don't want them to come in and take over our schools. They would be measuring and caring about things that I don't care about. They would be measuring and caring about issues. They would be grading our schools based on things other than whether or not our kids can read, write, and do math. They've shown that. This Board of Education is the one that dumbed down our diploma, right?
Well, the problem is, of course, that the reason the schools are doing or not doing is because of the Oregon Department of Education and their leadership to that. So you're right. If they came in, and I'm not saying they should, I'm just saying if they came in, all they're going to do is do the same thing.
Yeah, they wouldn't be better. And that's, if you look at this report just real briefly, and I wasn't in the committee that heard this presentation, but this is focused on the bureaucracy. There's nothing in here about the kid. There's nothing in here about students and how they're doing in the classroom and what they need. This is ODE needs to better track performance. ODE needs more information from the district. ODE needs to target online schools. It's basically, we have a tiny little bit of competition now. This report says we need to scrutinize them. We need to go after those charters. We need to go after those online bad actors. And I just have concerns that these folks don't want what I want for schools. And I appreciate a good audit, to be able to really bring to light issues that are systemic for what we actually need to pay attention to. But I don't know. I got trust issues with these people. I just don't think that they are in it to improve the system for the student. I think these folks are in it to cover their butts, and I think that they are in it to make the bureaucracy and the system achieve the outcomes that they want, which are political agendas and social agendas, and are not the agenda that I have, which is for these kids to be able to be capable and competent to go out into the world and find their future and go to trade school or enter the workforce or go to college or go into the military, whatever it is they choose. They should be able to read and write, and they should be able to hold a conversation, and they should be able to answer questions, and they should be able to read instructions and follow instructions. Like, there should be this range of basic expectations. And instead, I think that these folks are instead focused on whether or not the bureaucracy itself has enough data, and the bureaucracy itself is being fed. And maybe I'm wrong. I will, look forward to kind of seeing how some of this stuff plays out once it's implemented. But I think that their track record is not good.
So if you had a message for parents of the state of Oregon with students in the K through 12 age group, what would you ask of them? What would you want to tell them?
Get into the classroom, talk to the teachers, find out what they're doing, understand that believe half of what comes home in information, and the schools will believe half of what goes to school. But the key is you got to know your child and what they're learning in class. And I know we're all busy, but you can talk to the kid. You know, what are you doing today specifically?
Right.
Let's talk about math tonight.
Yeah.
Talk to me about math and what's going on in math. And make sure that you understand who the teacher is, get to know them so that you understand what the child is going to go through each day. It's all about parenting. I mean, if you're going to raise a child, you need to make sure they're raised correctly. And you can't leave it to the school.
I do love that. I do love that. Hear, hear.
On that note,
Yeah, I think that's a good place to,
That's
to
a great
call it a
place.
day.
yeah.
Engage.
Yeah.
That's the straightforward answer.
I always appreciated that my hallways were full of parents all the time. It was important that they're in there because they're the best PR I could possibly have. They're going to go out and say, oh, what a great principal I am. Man, we're in that school and they're doing wonderful things. And they were. I mean, we were doing some great things. But that's how you pass Bondilex.
You heard it here. Thank you for coming tonight, being part of our education episode.
Love it.
Thank
love
you.
it. Love it. And I really do appreciate you, Boomer. Can I do a Boomer shout out?
Please.
Because we have the opportunity in the minority to have your experience, lent to this conversation that can sometimes get heated. And as I'm not an educator, I'm a parent. And I want to fight for my kiddos. And I think it's my student, not your student. It's my kid, not your kid. And I want to be in the classroom and I want to see what's going on. And having educators that welcome that is pretty extraordinary. And your voice in the education policy issue area is really, really critical to our caucus. And I'd say, by extension, our work throughout the building. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I got on Ed's subcommittee this year. It's the first committee that I've ever been in, and this is my fifth year, that at the end of what we normally do, we have a 10-minute talk session about education. Imagine that. We sit and talk about things that we may have learned during the day and converse back and forth so we can share ideas. What a novel thought.
What a great experience.
Yes.
I'm going to guess that that's the leadership of Janine Solman.
Yeah, Janine and Ricky Ruiz.
Yeah. The one thing I've watched Senator Solman do is that open dialogue, that open engagement. I love that she chairs another policy committee and she invites students to come in. She dedicates time in that committee to allow students to come in and engage at the Oregon legislature. And she normally sets aside, I want to say it's 10, 15 minutes. At the end of every policy committee, she has the student spotlight and she invites kids to come and engage.
I had no idea she did that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's
great.
very cool.
We can't solve problems unless we talk about them.
But I love it because you're on that committee with Suzanne Weber.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to
Senator
make this.
Frederick.
I don't know if we'll be able to make this happen, but I would love it if you came back and facilitated a conversation with Suzanne and Noah Robinson. Get you a couple Senate members
I'd
from
love
the
it.
Education Committee.
Yeah, I'd love
Because
that.
again, this isn't necessarily my bailiwick. I've been a parent. I came up through the Tigard School District. I'm a product of public education. I believe in it. I think it's a great equalizer in society. I
Yeah.
think it allows for upward mobility when we do it right. And again, my kids are the product of public education. Both of them are doing extremely well. They're bright. They're articulate. But I will say, to your point, their education didn't end at 3:30 when the bell rang. Like
Yeah.
they came home, parents engaged, and it wasn't just how was your day? It was what did you learn today?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Oh, you mentioned this. And again, the social stuff too, which I do think today in this day and age is equally as important. The kids being able to talk about their interactions with their cohort. Just a lot of stuff's happening in schools these days that I think parents should be aware of. So
Yeah.
Get involved.
engage.
Get
Yep.
involved. Got to get involved.
Well,
Love
thank
it.
you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Alex.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.